Good morning, everybody. I'm really excited to see so many of you participating in this new format of the Elevate conference. We've had to adapt to this new format because of the pandemic to keep both you and our staff safe. But the silver lining in all of this is that it actually provides accessibility to the conference to many more people. We have thousands of people registered from all over the world, and you can chat online with your colleagues and peers. So, with that said, I want to continue on the positive note and kick off Elevate by sharing with you the new horizon for PowerBuilder and how we have been evolving PowerBuilder and are going to continue evolving PowerBuilder into the future. But before we start talking how PowerBuilder is evolving, let's define what PowerBuilder is. PowerBuilder has a very loyal base, and they're so devout that sometimes I feel it's kind of like PowerBuilder is Windex. You use it on everything, not just cleaning glass. And so our loyal PowerBuilder users are trying to use PowerBuilder to do everything and anything. But let's be clear what PowerBuilder is designed to do well. It's designed well to build native Windows apps, the client side, the user interface. PowerScript is a programming language for the client side, for user interface. It's not a server-side cloud programming language. And the unique thing about PowerBuilder, in my opinion, compared to all the other tools out there, is that it's data window-centric programming. And the data window is really PowerBuilder's secret sauce. So in the 90s, PowerBuilder was used to build client-server apps. As we're moving forward, there's still the need to build clients. It's just the architecture of these applications have evolved from client-server to cloud. So that kind of dovetails into the various needs our customers have for PowerBuilder. The PowerBuilder base is actually quite large. It's global, spans pretty much every industry you could imagine, and includes many of the world's Fortune 500 companies that have heavy investments in PowerBuilder. So we definitely have a segment that really needs to be able to just simply maintain their client-server applications for the long term. They're not ready to move to the cloud. They're not ready to make any change. They just need their systems to be stable. And we take this very seriously at Appeon, taking care of this maintenance need. Now, we have another segment that is further along. They're not looking just to maintain a client-server app. They're looking to API enable. Now, that doesn't mean it's completely converting to the cloud, but rather exposing certain business logic through APIs or consuming certain APIs from PowerBuilder. And then we have customers that are even further along. They're looking to completely convert off of client-server and cloudify. They need everything to be up in the cloud, and that's not just applying to PowerBuilder. They have systems developed in many different languages. That's usually the situation in a large company. They need to move all of those systems off of client-server into the cloud. And finally, business needs are constantly evolving. There's obviously need to enhance the existing systems, but there's the need to develop new systems. And increasingly, the new projects are being done in the cloud. And customers are finding that developing for the cloud is not so easy. It's not so productive like PowerBuilder. So there's definitely a need there that we can cater to. And at Appeon, over the last several years, we've been systematically executing against these different segments of needs so that we cater to all of them. So let's start with maintenance. Well, we've been enhancing PowerBuilder over the years, and it's still maintaining a client-server tool. That's not something that's going to go away. You'll be able to develop client-server for the foreseeable future and beyond, okay? Because our customers have so much investments in client-server that need to be maintained for the long haul. Now, with client-server, you're still developing with a PowerScript UI. We didn't make any change there. You're still coding logic in PowerScript because everything's on the client side. These are client-server. The server is the database, and all the programming's around data window. And we have done our best over the last few years to do some really critical things that customers need from a maintenance perspective for their existing applications. Now, The other segment of our customer base that is looking to API enable, we started to cater to this group back in 2019 by introducing SnapDevelop and a number of plugins that go into SnapDevelop. What SnapDevelop is a C# IDE that can allow you to rapidly API enable your PowerBuilder business logic. You can convert data windows into non-visual data windows in C# that we call .NET DataStore. You can take NVOs or non-visual PowerScript or embedded SQL, and using the PowerScript migrator plugin, you could convert that into C#. SnapDevelop includes scaffolding features that you could rapidly build a REST API controller or interface for your converted code. And under this model, you'll be using PowerBuilder in conjunction with SnapDevelop. So PowerBuilder is maintaining a client. SnapDevelop is developing your server-side assets. So under this hybrid client-server model, you still have direct connection to the database. But with SnapDevelop, you are developing C# logic that is called through REST API from PowerBuilder. And no matter you're coding your user interface in PowerScript or coding non-visual logic in C#, everything's centered around the data window. You have data window in PowerScript, and you have a non-visual data window in C# called the .NET DataStore. So cloudifying is an area that actually Appeon started its roots with PowerServer, and at that time it was webifying, not cloudifying. Cloud didn't exist back in the days when Appeon first started. And what we're doing starting into next year and on the early horizon is to transform PowerServer from a webification solution to the cloudification solution. So what that means is you're going to end up with a desktop cloud app. It's not client server, it's not a hybrid client server. It's a native app for Windows, but completely cloud driven by REST APIs. Now, under such architecture, you have your user interface in PowerScript, your logic is in C#, and both on the client and the server side, you have data windows. On the client side, visual data windows. On the server side, the non-visual called the .NET DataStore. Now, in terms of new development, we actually this year are introducing a new feature in PowerBuilder 2019 R3 called Power Client. And what Power Client allows you to do is develop a client side that is PowerScript, but is cloud deployable. So the idea is that this client side is not doing any direct communication to the database. You're developing new business logic in C# with the .NET DataStore, which is basically data window-centric programming. You're developing your UI in PowerBuilder, and we have a number of visual enhancements that can benefit your cloud UI, such as UI themes, ribbon bars, web browser control. And the Power Client takes care of making sure the client side of PowerBuilder is a desktop cloud app deployable. Now, all of these tools can be used in conjunction. We have customers that need to maintain some client-server applications. Some apps are ready to be API enabled. Some are ready to even move to the cloud as a first step. And then you can even do new development. And all of these things can be done together, which is going to move on to my next slide, which is about data windows in the cloud, or getting all of your non-visual layer into the cloud. Okay, so that's really the heart of PowerBuilder. Let's not get bogged down with the PowerBuilder ID and the PowerScript language. That's for developing client side. Let's talk about developing server side, because these are cloud. Now, for server side, you can use PowerServer to pull out all of your data windows in embedded SQL. Basically, all of the data access of your existing PowerBuilder applications that are client server, you can automatically convert that to the cloud. Exposes REST APIs. Now, this converted code is actually pure C# that can be maintained in any IDE, but we also include a C# IDE called SnapDevelop so that you don't have to go purchase anything besides your PowerBuilder product bundle. Now, SnapDevelop also includes a plugin called PowerScript Migrator, which will take the existing business logic you have in PowerScript and convert it to C#. And again, you could use any C# IDE or SnapDevelop. The benefit of using SnapDevelop is, besides it allowing you to convert the business logic over, it can help you rapidly scaffold the REST interface for your converted business logic. Now, this converted business logic would include your PowerScript data stores. It would include non-visual PowerScript. It would include embedded SQL. All of that gets converted over. And of course, the .NET data store that we provide is not just for being used by Power Server to convert your data windows over, or to be used by PowerScript Migrator to be used for converting business logic. The .NET data store is also for new development. When you're looking to develop cloud assets that are REST API enabled, doing that in C#, what better way to do that than with the productivity of data window? And that's what the .NET data store is providing for you. So it's great for developing new cloud assets. Now, once you have this whole layer, imagine you have all of these data windows and NVOs that are converted over, and then you've developed new C# REST APIs with .NET Data Store. The beauty of REST APIs, all of this can be shared, reused across a number of different UI technologies. And they can be mixed and matched. You no longer have silos where NVO A can only be used by application A and data window B is only for application B. Okay? So you can be developing new UIs with Power Client in PowerBuilder using PowerScript as well as data window controls that are consuming the converted NVOs, that are consuming new logic you've developed in C# REST API, that are consuming maybe some data windows that are now API enabled, that were from a different application converted to Power Server. Now, Power Server is a conversion solution. It's also giving you a desktop cloud app just like a Power Client, but it's for conversion because you already have an existing client-server application, and it'd be a lot of work to go through and try to migrate all of those data windows over and migrate all the SQL over to the server and redo the code to consume REST APIs. That'd be a ton of work. So what Power Server does is automates that conversion of your client server to desktop cloud apps. And with SnapDevelop, we're supporting a number of different UI technologies that these are standard UI technologies such as ASP.NET Core, Angular, React Native. So you can use this with not just SnapDevelop, you could use it with Visual Studio or any other IDE, but what's great is that SnapDevelop is very lightweight, easy to use, and I think you'll find it's very productive to develop new user interfaces. So for example, imagine you have a very large PowerBuilder app, you've converted with Power Server, and now there's a particular module that needs to be on the mobile device. Well, with everything converted already on the server side that is non-visual, you just need to build a face in, for example, React Native with SnapDevelop that then interfaces with the REST APIs. So you can have a mix of these different user interface technologies, and UI technology is constantly evolving. So you can evolve that without losing your most precious layer, which is your server-side layer. Now, with that said, I want to turn it over to one of our Appeon MVPs, Marco Mioni, that has been involved with a company developing a commercial product called Alpha. And what's very interesting is this was a completely new development from the ground up. And it's doing exactly the way I just talked about in the previous slide, which was using the .NET Data Store to build new cloud assets in C# with the productivity of data window, exposes REST APIs, which then gives you the flexibility to snap whatever face you want on top of your PowerBuilder business logic. And so let's let Marco give you a brief rundown of that.
The UI in this demo is created with popular JavaScript frameworks, Vue.js and Quasar, while the backend is fully implemented with REST API built in SnapDevelop. I'm running the web app from Safari on a macOS. There is a login page based on JWT to provide authentication and remember me. When user gets authenticated, the single page application starts and you can see the UI components, a header bar with the hamburger menu, the logo, the title, and the user profile panel. The left sidebar and the central canvas are finally separated by padding containers with animations and over effects all over. Each screen of the single page application has a toolbar, that reacts to changes. For example, make a change and the save buttons gets enabled. The UI is very fluid and the resize is automatic. Even controls like calendar or just the field reset icon have their own animation. If you save, or should you get any error, the user gets notification popping up from the bottom edge. Let me click somewhere else. For instance, a data list with built-in sorting, filtering, or multi-selection. Whatever you do, it always goes by good-looking hovering or focus effects. For example, when I click on a checkbox, there is a ripple interaction effect, while the delete button is enabled. There's a pop-up detail window where, for example, I have this nice multi-selection field. Click on possible selection, make a change, and get them recapped by nice so-called chips button. Or let me show you the journal. For example, where you have a nested grid, where you can collapse or expand the rows, and you can see the detail. See how beautiful is this window with multiple tab pages and colored buttons to handle detailed data. If I now switch to my phone, needless to say that the UI adapts automatically with 0 line of code on different screens. Here I have my iPhone where the left side menu now overlays the page because the space is smaller and therefore more precious. And you see that the window shown before just resizes vertically or horizontally with very, very fluid user interface. And the UI components are all based on material design, a library maintained by Google. So no matter if you believe in that or you think it's bullshit, point is that today it looks good and makes good impression. And the large majority of web application and mobile apps are based on it. So follow the step-by-step tutorial to learn how to build this user interface and user experience based on the PowerBuilder demo database and the employee tables exposed via REST API.
All right, Marco, thank you very much. That was excellent demo. I'm going to resume now talking about Power Server. So as I mentioned earlier, Power Server is something that has been a webification solution, not a cloudification solution. And that's what the current Power Server is. So what's the missing piece in the whole vision that I outlined for you, where everything is cloud and all the UI mix and match? What's missing is Power Server 2021. So let's briefly review 2020 to understand why it's not the ideal solution. First of all, Power Server 2020 only supports about 50 to 65% of PowerBuilder features. So although it's a native application, it's kind of dumbed down compared to what a PowerBuilder client-server app could do from a client-side functionality perspective. And as a result of so many unsupported features, a conversion typically takes many months of remediating unsupported features. Now, from a design perspective, we developed Power Server 20 years ago when understanding of software development and sophistication was not as high as it is today. So we designed that as a black box solution, which in hindsight, that's not the best idea. And because it's a black box solution, the security is also very rigid. It's whatever security mechanisms Appeon has implemented in Power Server. Different companies have different needs for security. Security is a very sensitive topic, and they're not able to implement what they'd like to implement. Now, it's a traditional web architecture, no surprise, because it was developed years ago before the cloud even existed. Back in the day, Amazon was, to me, a place to buy books. I never thought it'd be a cloud hosting company. Now, the .NET framework it's based on is the traditional .NET framework, version 4.0, which actually, in case you're not aware, it's obsolete. Microsoft is completely doing away with the traditional .NET framework because the cloud is just too strong of a force. and they're trying to come up with a new framework for the cloud, which I'll be talking about in a minute. Now, in terms of server OS, .NET, C#, all of this historically has been Windows OS only on the server side. Microsoft was trying to lock you down, but they've had a shift in thinking with the new .NET Core, and I'll be talking about that in a minute. And on the client side, these are web applications, but they're not HTML. There's no way you can recreate all of the functionality of PowerBuilder in HTML with just JavaScript. So we actually use like a hybrid approach where we have some JavaScript and we have a browser plugin. And as a result, you only run on a Windows device. So even though it runs in a browser, it's not really a cross-browser solution. Now, 2021 is going to address all of these shortcomings so that PowerBuilder has a strong cloud conversion solution to allow you to get all of your existing assets up in the cloud, along with the new development that you're going to be doing with the .NET DataStore. So the new PowerServer 2021 supports basically 100% of PowerBuilder features. And as a result, conversion effort can be days or even less. The design is an open design. So on the client side, you have PowerScript. You can see all of that PowerScript code inside the PowerBuilder IDE, and you can modify it as you see fit. It's not black box. On the server side, it's C# source code. Again, it's open. You compile that C# code yourself, and you can modify it. It's a completely open design that's extensible. So your hands are not tied in any way. It's like a canvas that you can draw on. From a security perspective, because of its open design, it's flexible, and we have allowed you to implement whatever you want. You could use OAuth 2.0, for example. If you're hosting on AWS or Azure, you could use one of their security services rather than you implementing your own security, which then in a very short amount of time you could be up and running. Now, from an architecture perspective, this is cloud native. What does that mean? That means everything's REST API driven. Everything is managed code. It's designed to be cloud deployable. When it came to the .NET framework, we went with .NET Core because we wanted this to be cloud native architecture, easily cloud deployable, and we wanted to be cross OS on the server side. So you're not limited to running Windows OS only. If you want to run Linux, for example, you can. On the client side, it's a desktop cloud app, and desktop cloud app is for developing Windows applications that are cloud deployable, cloud driven. So we've done away with browser plugin and having any hassles that browser configuration may cause. We've done away with trying to convert PowerScript to JavaScript. This is a native, thin PowerBuilder client that interfaces with the cloud assets. So let's talk a little more about the runtime architecture. I was getting a little ahead of myself there as I was drilling down and contrasting differences. This will give you a better understanding of what this all looks like. So a desktop cloud app on the client side is a PowerScript executable with PowerScript bytecode that basically your pibbles are converted into PBDs. And I'll be talking in more detail how we do that conversion, but the way we do it's very smart. In PowerServer 2021, your PBDs can be incrementally updated at an object level. So it's very internet friendly. You might have external files or resource files that your application requires, might be a DLL, an OCX. Those are all packaged into the application, as well as the PBVM and other runtime modules related to PBVM. For example, if you're using our UI themes to modernize the UI, you would include the UI themes helper library. Okay, so that is the client-side portion. Now, you may be thinking, well, what's the difference between this and client-server? Well, first of all, the application automatically installs over the internet to your Windows devices. And when we say Windows device, anything running Windows 10. It could be desktop, laptop, Surface tablets that have Intel CPU and so on. So there's a variety of devices out there, including some that are very portable tablets that run the Windows operating system. Okay, so you're internet deploying, and also it automatically updates over the internet. Okay, So anytime, let's say you've modified a data window, you've modified a window, it'll push down that incremental change to your Windows devices over the internet. So that's one very big difference from client server, even though we have an exe with PBDs on the client side. Now, the other difference is that the client side does not execute any data access at all. So you have a data window control. It's not doing a data window retrieve against a database. You have embedded SQL in your application that you coded. It's not executing SQL. There's no database drivers on the machine. All it needs is an internet connection out to the server. So then what's on the server? The server is a whole C# layer that has a REST interface so that it can interface with the client through standard REST technology. And the REST interfaces then call the PowerServer APIs, which then call the embedded SQL and data window. The data access portion. So imagine, you have a data window control, there's a data object behind it that's doing your data definitions. It's that portion, the non-visual part of data window, that's on the server, it's not on the client. And PowerServer takes care of all of this for you. Okay? So if you look on the client side, it's no longer executing embedded SQL, PB select for the data windows or anything like that. And all of this is running on .NET Core 3.1, which currently is the latest version of the .NET, as well as a long-term support version. So now, this C# data access non-visual layer on the server side is what's through TCP/IP, through database drivers, talking to your database, your relational database. And we support lots of different databases, so I think pretty much anything you're already using today is covered, but you can refer to the PowerServer 2021 documentation for the full system requirements. Now, because we've switched over from the browser plugin of PowerServer 2020 to PBVM, that's the reason why we can basically support 100% of PowerBuilder features now. And since we're no longer converting PowerScript to JavaScript, we keep it as native PowerScript, you're getting native performance. Sometimes PowerScript can be very heavy on the client side. JavaScript tends to be a slower language than other languages when it's executing. So you'll find that you'll get a performance boost in PowerServer 2021 compared to 2020. Now on the server side is where there's really also a really big change compared to before. By us switching out .NET to .NET Core, we now have a cloud native and a cross-OS platform that we can build upon. We're moving all of the embedded SQLs and data window models out to the server. It's not on the client anymore being passed to the server. It resides on the server. So this is far more secure by today's standards. So that's another benefit to move off of client server to a cloud architecture. It's a more secure architecture. Now, since these are REST interfaces, when I say REST, I mean this is standard REST JSON. So it's not just limited to be used by your PowerBuilder user interface that PowerServer converts. Any other UI technology that's capable of calling REST over HTTP and parsing out JSON can consume your interface, to your data windows, your embedded SQL, and you can perform full CRUD. It's not just reading data. You could do creates, updates, and deletes. And because this is cloud native, it means that you could take advantage of container technology, for example, Docker deployable. It runs on AWS, Azure, any of the cloud platforms, and you don't have to worry about incompatibility issues, or can I use this feature, or can I use that feature? You could take advantage of what Amazon has to offer, or Azure, or whatever cloud you're looking to use. All right, so now that we've talked about the runtime architecture, let's talk about the conversion process. How does this magic happen that PowerServer will automatically take care of all these things for me? So I want to outline that for you. There's really a two-step process. You have the client-side conversion, which that's performed from within the PowerBuilder IDE. It's kind of similar to what PowerBuilder does today, but there's some differences, so that when you have the PowerServer option for PowerBuilder IDE, it's going to do the compilation a little different than client server. So the first thing it's going to do different is it's going to remove the embedded SQL from your pivot. So that way, With PowerServer, you can continue coding as if it's client-server application. You don't have to design it to be cloud native from the ground up, and it will take care of adjusting that for you. It'll also encrypt the SQL or PB select that you have inside your data window control. And it'll compile the application, so that actually is relying on the PowerBuilder ID to do the compile. That's not PowerServer. But another unique thing that we do is that it's going to extract the objects out of the PBDs after it's compiled. So rather than have one monolithic PBD file, inside of one PBD, it's going to be broken down into a folder, and that folder contains each of the data window objects, one file. One file for each of your window objects, one file for each of your structures, and so on. Okay. So what that allows us to do is, rather than installing or updating your application at a PBD level, we can do much more granular file updates. We could do it at an object level. And then as part of this deployment process, it's going to sign your application. We have a number of different options to sign the application. You don't have to, but we strongly recommend this to ensure the integrity and security of your application. Okay. And it's going to package and include all the other things besides your application that is necessary to run. So for example, you might be using some external DLLs. You obviously need a PBVM and related modules. So all of that gets packaged up, deployed to the web server. You can deploy to the web server directly from the PowerBuilder ID using FTP, or you could create an installable package, which then you pass off to your IT administrator to do that install. So this is the client-side generation, step 1 of 2. Now let's talk about the second step, the server generation. This generation is also performed from within the PowerBuilder IDE. It's not that you have to do a lot of coding in C# or anything like that. All that conversion is done in PowerBuilder. And it's going to automatically convert your embedded SQLs to C# constants that are going to reside on the server side in your API project. It's going to convert your data windows to standard C# or what's called POCO models. Okay, so this is all standard, not a proprietary format. You could view it and edit it in any ID you want. And it's going to generate a C# project that's going to house the embedded SQLs and the data windows. Okay. And then it's going to generate a skeleton of a .NET Core Web API project. So basically, this is like the REST interface to the embedded SQLs and your .NET data stores or your converted data windows. Okay. And all of this is open, so you're able to edit it. You could add your own security to the REST API or extend it. So it's really up to you what you want to do with that. Now, this conversion process is truly automatic. I said basically we support 100% features, so let me clarify what I mean by basically. There's 2 features not supported. First is the reselect row function of data window. Okay. Now, it's not something that we can't support, and so it's possible we may support in the future this particular unsupported feature. The second unsupported feature is if you're using the retrieve row event of a data window, and now here's the caveat, this has to also be true. You have to have database-related code in the retrieve row event. So what is database-related code? It could be embedded SQL. It could be a data window retrieve. It could be a data window update. So just using retrieve row event by itself is not a problem at all. That's supported. You just can't put database-related code in that. Why? Because this event is executing on the client side, and PowerServer is giving you a desktop cloud app with a cloud-native architecture. We can't execute this database-related code on the client side, and we're not going through trying to parse that. There's only so much that we can magically convert. So this is one area that PowerServer is not handling automatically for you. Now, just to clarify, even though basically 100% of PowerBuilder features are supported and you don't have to make a lot of code changes, that's not to say there's absolutely no work at all to do. You need to compile this because the C# project, as we said, it's not a black box, it's open. So you have to compile that. And of course, there's some configuration you need to do. Anytime you're moving from client server to cloud, you have to set up your database connections, you have timeout settings and so on. So there's that kind of stuff, but it's not like you have to go through and rewrite your PowerBuilder app. You basically don't, because all of the features are practically supported. All right, so now let's talk a little more about the key benefit of an open design. I think is that it puts you in control of security. We've gotten all sorts of demands, especially from our Fortune 500 customers. They have very, very high security requirements, a lot of banks and other insurance and other regulated industries. So now you're in control with the open design. But the caveat is that you need to have knowledge of security. It's not being automatically handled for you. And there is some work to do. But the conversion is automatic. This security is not something you have to do to convert your app and just see it running. It's what you need to do before you really go live, before you expose your application to the public. So let's take a look at the high-level steps of what you need to do to control security with this new open design of PowerServer. The first thing you need to do is, inside your PowerBuilder application, in PowerScript, modify your login code. Most PowerBuilder applications have some sort of login authentication procedure, and that needs to be modified to call the PowerServer Authentication API. Now, depending on how you've implemented your security, this could be several hours of coding work, and this is just a rough estimate. And disclaimer here is this assuming you know what you're doing, obviously. If you don't know, then learning and understanding how to do security is another topic outside of this. So we can't predict how long it takes you to learn, but once you understand it, the amount of actual work and coding and testing should not be more than several hours to modify this portion in the PowerScript. Now, on the server side, that's C#. What you need to do is enable authentication in the startup file that PowerServer is automatically going to generate in that C# project for you. And enabling that authentication option, it should not take you more than 15 minutes. Now, the key part that you'll be doing in C# is really implementing your authentication, what security you want to do. We have some default authentication code, but that's really meant like a placeholder. We don't recommend that you just enable that and call it a day. Unless you don't have a very high security requirement, then it'll work. You can do basic tokens. But if you want to really get fancy, there's all sorts of things you could do. For example, people are integrating OAuth 2.0, OpenID. Now, how long all of this takes really depends on where you want to take the security. It's a blank canvas. It's up to you what you add. You may already have this kind of security implemented for other REST APIs that your company is doing in C#. And so you might be able to even copy and paste a lot of that code over and reuse that. If you're going with AWS, Azure, some of the cloud providers, these days are providing security as a service. So rather than you build that up, you can just call one of their services, one of their APIs. And if you're simply using one of these built-in services, then it might only take you several hours to implement. But if you're not going to use a pre-built service and you're doing your own solution from the ground up, it could take days, it could take weeks. It just really depends. So it's a little bit hard to predict, but this would probably be the most work that the PowerServer would possibly require of you. The actual functionality conversions, as I mentioned, basically truly automatic. All right, now I want to make sure that there's no misunderstanding. Even though you can develop client server and you don't have to partition your business logic away from your UI, PowerServer takes care of moving the data access out to the server for you automatically so that you could just keep your app as a client server from a design perspective. But from a deployment perspective, it's a cloud native architecture. Okay, so, but you may have the need to take some of your business logic out. Why? Because you might want to share that business logic, not just keep it for use by PowerServer, but you want that business logic to be used by other applications. So, for example, one use case we see a lot is we have customers that want to mobilize one small part or module or even just function of their large PowerBuilder application. Okay, so that part that you might want to have available on a mobile device not just on Windows devices, so for example, iOS or Android, you might want to then take care of moving that business logic out from the client into the server. So how would you do that? How does that easily plug in the Power Server? Well, there is some work to do. It's not 100% automatic. So Power Server is not that magical. You'd actually need to partition that logic. And unfortunately, most PowerBuilder applications were not developed according to the best practices Sybase was preaching, that you encapsulate things in MVOs. There are customers use some, there's customers use none. You will need to partition out whatever business logic you want to deploy to the server. You do need to partition that out. So that's manual work right there. But in the PowerBuilder Power Server bundle, we include the PowerScript migrator, which will automatically convert MVOs into C# REST APIs. Now, it's not 100% automatic because PowerScript and C# are apple and orange, it's two different languages, but we can probably achieve 80% of conversion of your MVOs. So there is some of that polishing the generated code, as I said. It's not 100%, it's probably 80% or maybe even higher. Now, that generated C# code, you could use any IDE once it's in C#, but if you use SnapDevelop, it'll take care of automatically scaffolding the REST interface to that converted C# logic. And then you need to modify your PowerBuilder application to call that REST API. So rather than doing a local function call to that MVO, instead that MVO is gone now. We've converted it to the server. Your PowerBuilder app needs to use the new REST client object to then make a REST API call to this converted MVO now. Okay. So, but once it's converted to the REST API, then it can be called by any other technology. So how you deploy this, you simply need to include it in the C# project that Power Server generates for you. So after you've done that conversion, just add that to the project. That makes deployment a lot easier. You don't need to maintain this business logic separate from your Power Server app. It's part of it, but it can be called by anything else. All right. So here on what you're looking at is the Power Server project. You have the embedded SQLs and data windows generated by Power Server. You have the REST interfaces generated by Power Server. And then the blue portion is what we've converted and added into the stack. And all of this could be packaged, for example, in a Docker container and easily deployed. And then free for use by any other UI technology such as a mobile application. Right? Okay, so let's briefly recap the benefits for users of taking advantage of something like Power Server to convert your client-server applications to the cloud. So the users are going to have internet access to the application. They're going to have automatic updates. So there's basically no disruption to their work. They can work from wherever they need to. It's just a lot more flexible than a client-server on-premise model. And there's no user retraining because basically 100% of PowerBuilder features are supported. The application is not at all being dumbed down like you would typically do for an HTML application. The UI is not going to be radically different. It's not pages. It's still window, MDI driven, or however you built your UI, you're preserving that. So there's no retraining for the user. Now, for the IT department, there's a lot of benefits too. I mean, if you're looking to cloud enable, unless you have a very strict requirement that your UI absolutely has to be HTML and you have a very good reason why it has to be HTML, it's really a no-brainer to use Power Server 2021 because it's going to give you a cloud-native architecture. It's not just a webification solution. It is not remote desktop. It is converting a cloud-native architecture, freeing up your data windows and embedded SQL to be reused by other systems and user interfaces. And by adding the PowerScript migrator and converting your MVOs, you also expose your business logic. So it gives you all of the benefits that the cloud can offer. But it's the only solution that is allowing you to reuse so much of all the existing investments you have. You're reusing your PowerBuilder skills. You're reusing basically 100% of your PowerBuilder code. And why is that important? The more things you change, the more code you rewrite, anytime you introduce new people into the team, all of these are risks for the project failing or going over budget. Now, basically the cost is negligible. I mean, as we looked at, the conversion is basically automatic. Adding some security could be days. So what other way are you going to be able to convert a client-server app into the cloud-native app in such short time and short costs? So I hope you guys are excited as I am about how PowerBuilder is going to be evolving, not just enhanced to maintain client-server applications for the long haul, but truly evolving to build a new generation of desktop cloud applications. And Julie, the PowerBuilder product manager, will be sharing with you details of what kind of enhancements we're doing on the client-server side, what kind of enhancements we're doing on the cloud side and in C#. And you'll see that no matter you're coding in PowerScript or C#, no matter you're using PowerBuilder as a UI or using a different UI technology, data window is at the core of everything that we do related to PowerBuilder. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Amin. Dear Animate attendees, I'm very glad to meet you online here. Today, I will be sharing my annual update on various product management topics for PowerBuilder, including upcoming release schedule and exciting new features we have planned in the near future. Before we begin, please allow me to reiterate this disclaimer. The product plans outlined here are our best estimation at this point. There could be any number of circumstances, some beyond our control, that could result in changes to these plans. With that said, Appeon has had an overall good delivery record according to planned roadmap. PowerBuilder product bundles. First, I'd like to quickly address a question about product packaging that has been asked frequently. Between PowerBuilder Professional and PowerBuilder Cloud Pro, which product bundle is most suitable for my project? You can think of PowerBuilder Professional as the core bundle. It contains not only what you need to maintain your existing client-server projects, but it also contains everything you need to develop new hybrid or cloud-native apps with data window technology. If you want to automatically convert existing client-server projects to the cloud, I recommend you carefully evaluate the upcoming PowerServer 2021 version. It automatically deploys PowerBuilder client-server projects as desktop cloud apps, supporting basically 100% of PowerBuilder features and almost zero conversion work. If you want to share or expose certain PowerBuilder business logic, I recommend you carefully evaluate the PowerScript migrator. It automatically converts PowerBuilder business logic to C# REST APIs that can be consumed not only by PowerBuilder, but by virtually any UI technology. So, with that said, PowerBuilder Cloud Pro is the whole enchilada, and it gives your existing projects the absolute fastest conversion path to the cloud. Recent product releases. In early Q2 this year, we have delivered PowerBuilder InfoMaker 2019 R2. And then in September, 2019 R3 beta was started. Over this past year, MRs have been arranged based upon customers' needs and issues. We have delivered one 2019 MR and two 2019 R2 MRs. And with PowerServer, we had a major release in Q2. It is version 2020. Note, this version is designated as a long-term support version, so we recommend all PowerServer customers to upgrade to this version. With upcoming product releases, We plan to release PowerBuilder InfoMaker 2019 R3 in early Q1 of next year. It will be a long-term support version. Not much later, version 2021 will come out. This new major version is a dedicated release for desktop cloud apps and PowerServer 2021. You may note, we do not plan to deliver revisions of this major version. So after version 2021, you should expect version 2022, and then revisions of 2022. With PowerServer, we plan to annually release MRs of version 2020 and simultaneously deliver the version that supports desktop cloud apps, version 2021, version 2022, and so on. PowerBuilder roadmap focus. Now that our team has been making improvements to PowerBuilder for 4 years, we consider the following 4 focus areas are the most important for the midterm redevelopment of the PowerBuilder tool and your existing business applications. Cloud architecture. Cloud architecture is definitely the trend of the future. An IDE to build cloud apps, automatically cloud conversion, and cloud programming framework are the keys for PowerBuilder to bring its value to the new way of building apps. Modern UI. To modernize the UI of PowerBuilder applications, we need them to blend seamlessly with the UI UX of other Windows 10 apps, provide more new UI controls, and make the UI more compatible, for example, with high-resolution monitors and UI automation tools. 3S initiative. Sustainability, stability, and security may sound boring, but it is very critical to many Appeon customers, especially our Fortune 500 customers. PowerBuilder is used in mission-critical situations, and they need to ensure it is reliable for years to come. Product IDE. Productive IDE. Despite all the love the data window receives, the PowerBuilder IDE leaves much to be desired. We really wanted to turn our attention to the IDE sooner, but we just had too much on our plate. In the midterm, we specifically plan to optimize existing IDE features, add more modern IDE features, and enhance 64-bit development. Cloud IDE. In 2019 and 2019 R2, we started to build a C# IDE for REST API development as part of all PowerBuilder product bundles. This C# IDE is called SnapDevelop, and it offers the core IDE features for developing, analyzing, debugging, and deploying REST API projects. But most important, it provides tight integration with PowerBuilder and the .NET DataStore, so you can develop REST APIs much faster than using other C# tools, such as Visual Studio. In 2019 R3, we took further steps to enhance the development of REST APIs. Async programming is supported. The scaffolding function now enables you to create synchronous or asynchronous methods in the generated services. Paste JSON as classes and paste XML as classes, respectively, support converting the pasted content in an XML or JSON file into .NET classes, which will save a lot of time. We have enhanced the debugging, so it's possible to define exceptions, add conditions, and actions for the exceptions. The debugging capability is more robust now. There is a built-in Docker Explorer. It provides you a convenient and integrated way of interacting with local remote Docker engines and Docker repositories. Your cloud projects can now connect to more databases. For example, SAP's SE and HANA databases are now supported. Or you can take advantage of cloud databases such as Amazon RDS, Amazon Aurora, and Azure. It is now possible to create .NET Core 3.1 projects. This is currently the latest version of .NET, and another reason to use this version is it's a long-term support version. In case SnapDevelop hasn't caught your eye yet compared to Visual Studio, in the versions to come after 2019 R3, you will be able to develop complete cloud apps in it. For example, there will be options for you to code in HTML, JavaScript, TypeScript, Angular. It will be possible for you to more easily develop microservices and serverless applications and deploy them on Amazon Web Services. The testing, debugging, and deployment of applications will be well integrated in the IDE. For example, Docker cluster deployment, cross-OS debugging, and remote debugging. Cloud conversion and programming. We understand when converting to the cloud, all the significant investments in existing projects cannot be ignored. As such, we have not only focused on new cloud programming, but we have also put heavy focus on various approaches to cloud conversion. All our cloud conversion approaches leverage your PowerBuilder skills, data windows, and they are semi-automatic as well as fully automatic conversion options. Specifically, in version 2019, we provided the .NET DataStore, which enables you to rapidly develop C# REST APIs based on data window functionality. We also provided the data window converter to automatically convert existing data windows into .NET data stores. In version 2019 R2, we provided the PowerScript migrator for you to convert existing PowerBuilder business logic automatically. This becomes the fastest way to reuse your valuable PowerBuilder business logic with other UI technology, such as HTML pages or native mobile apps. Version 2019 R3 supports Power Client app deployments. Power Client solves the headaches associated with deploying and updating client-server applications on-premise. The runtime architecture of Power Client applications is hybrid because the application is cloud deployable and its client side can make calls to REST APIs while still having direct interactions to the database. PowerBuilder 2021, together with PowerServer 2021, will support desktop cloud app deployments. The applications will still run natively on the Windows desktop with the functionality and UI of desktop applications, while their database and the database-related operations residing in the cloud. The database and database-related operations are converted to standard REST APIs that can be consumed not only by PowerBuilder, but also by any other UI technology. The future versions will gradually provide more UI development options for the client-side implementation if you prefer to do everything with tools provided by Appeon. Then, for web or mobile development or for both, you can develop ASP.NET Core web apps in C# or web apps in JavaScript or TypeScript. And for developing native mobile apps, you can use React Native to implement the client side. I would like to leave you with one last thought. No matter which UI technology or which of your cloud approaches you ultimately go with. Data windows are at the center of everything, and Appeon has done its best to make it as easy as possible. Modern UI. As our understanding of how business people use software progressed, we now realize that UI is a critical factor in the success and longevity of your business applications. In 2019 and 2019 R2, it has been our focus to deliver the Windows 10 style to PowerBuilder with minimal code changes of existing applications. We introduced the UI theme feature, which is a codeless solution for applying Windows 10 style to existing visual objects, such as command button, single line edit, data window, and so on. Then, we introduced the ribbon bar control, so application navigation conforms with the Windows 10 style. We also provided a complete set of icons and pictures in Windows 10 style. Adding more UI control to PowerBuilder is also on the roadmap, but it's not a race to add the most controls possible. Rather, we are focused on essential controls that really should have been added to PowerBuilder years ago. In 2019 R3, we replaced two existing controls with a far more powerful implementation. We replaced the 64-bit Microsoft Rich Text Edit control with the 64-bit TX text control. Now, 64-bit applications will have the same powerful rich text functionality as 32-bit. In addition, we incorporated the latest version of TX text control so that 32-bit users benefit from additional features and fixes. We've also replaced the OLED web browser that is based on Internet Explorer with a new web browser control based on Chromium. Aside from Chromium being far more secure than Internet Explorer and properly supporting the latest web technologies such as HTML5, it can now support integration between JavaScript and PowerScript. For example, you can pull data from PowerBuilder applications or databases and then utilize a charting library such as Google Chart, eCharts to present the powerful graphical charts. We understand that UI of PowerBuilder applications needs to stay compatible with the technological changes that have been widely adopted. For example, high-resolution monitors and UI automation. So, in 2019 R3, we have also made this enhancement. PBU conversion functions now supports long data type in addition to integer. This way, it can handle the large number of pixels of high-resolution screens. We've now added support for Microsoft UI automation. Not only will your PowerBuilder application be more accessible by visually impaired users, but also you can take advantage of a variety of UI automation tools to automate your business processes. Down the road, we plan to keep focusing on conforming to the Windows 10 style, adding other essential controls that are missing, and continue to ensure the UI of PowerBuilder applications stays compatible. What I can share with you today is that we do have plans to revamp graph data windows. Also, we plan to add new modern controls, such as dynamic tab and status bar. 3S initiative. Sustainability, stability, and security are very critical factors for many PowerBuilder customers, especially our Fortune 500 customers. We are putting great efforts to ensure our customers' mission-critical applications are reliable for years to come. On sustainability, in the past versions, We have enhanced the interoperability of PowerBuilder applications with external sources, such as REST APIs and .NET assemblies, enhanced the 64-bit support, and also continued updating the supported environments. 2019 R3 adds support for the new Microsoft OLEDB driver for SQL Server. In future versions, we plan to provide SMTP email integration, further enhance the performance and memory handling for 64-bit applications, and stay current with the latest OS database versions. Stability. For the past, now, and the future, we have focused on and will continue to focus on fixing more crash issues, fixing more performance issues, and fixing more product bugs. On security, we have added a number of security features over the past years, and I have explained most of them in previous Innovate conferences. With Power Client and Power Server app deployment options, to ensure the security of deployed applications, there will be an encryption option. If checked, all the PBD files downloaded to the client will be encrypted, so they cannot be readily decompiled. We understand how important security is, and our internal policy is that any security vulnerability issue should be treated with the highest priority. Productive IDE. As I mentioned earlier, we have had our plates full, so we only had made small progress on IDE enhancement. For example, in version 2019 and 2019 R2, there were a number of small changes, such as Git SVN support, new picture selection tool, the search features in the browser, etc., etc. However, starting with 2019 R3, we are starting to make significant improvements. The decoupling of PowerBuilder IDE and runtime. Now, you will have more flexible IDE and runtime version management, and your application can be more efficiently tested against new runtime versions. Starting from this version and going forward, it will be possible for you to use multiple different major versions on the same computer using a single license. And there are a few other changes, such as we further enhanced the Git source control. Now the IDE system dialogues are resizable and easier to use. And also, you will be able to complete tasks related to the object browser or drop-down data window from a data window with fewer clicks. We really think it important to make major changes to PowerBuilder IDE. There have been many requests for it, and we've done our best to take action. In the coming versions, we plan to put more focus to this area. These items are what we plan to address for the midterm. Tabbed editor, optimized AutoScript, optimized build and compilation, better support of continuous integration and continuous development, 64-bit debugging and desktop cloud app debugging, enhanced search capability, and IDE combination environment upgrade. And there are miscellaneous annoying behaviors in the IDE we have collected from your feedback. It is hard for me to list all of them here, but our team is determined to systematically address them. Customer involvement. In February, we conducted a PowerBuilder survey collecting feedback on users' experiences and expectations of PowerBuilder. We received many great suggestions, some of which made it in PowerBuilder 2019 R3 and some of which made it into the product roadmap. But what I'd like to share with you are several questions and answers from the survey that you may find of interest. What is the newest version of PowerBuilder you have tried? 85% of respondents have updated to an Appeon version of PowerBuilder, which is 2017 and newer. Version 12.6 was the last version made by SAP. How would you rate your general satisfaction level with the newest version of PowerBuilder you tried? About 75% of the respondents are satisfied or very satisfied. The way I interpret these results is our customers recognize we have a lot of work to do still, but are being appreciative how quickly we have been improving things from before. How would you rate your installation experience with the newest version of PowerBuilder? Over 80% of respondents are satisfied or very satisfied. The most liked features we added into PowerBuilder 2019 R2 include UI theme, natively integrating C# libraries, web browser control, ribbon bar control, data window to C# converter, and PowerScript to C# migrator. The most liked features we planned in the PowerBuilder roadmap include desktop cloud app, new graph type, tabbed PowerScript editor, and 64-bit debugging. Besides actively taking part in the product survey I just showed you, our customers have contributed in a variety of ways that is helping us take PowerBuilder down the right path. Our beta program is a very useful channel for me. Of course, it helps our product engineers catch bugs. But what I'm most interested in is your ideas how to refine the new features. I'm grateful for all the feedback from the 2019 R3 beta, which we are now actively incorporating for the final release in January of 2021. The Q&A is another very useful channel for me. While I don't frequently post, I'm constantly monitoring the forums to see if there is anything product management related. One post that caught my attention is "What's your top IDE change?", which was studied by Appeon MVP Mike Sierra. This post has really helped us to create roadmap for the IDE. Support tickets is another very useful channel for me. When a ticket is closed because it's not a bug and we see repetitive tickets, we have a process to review to see if there are any improvements we can make in the documentation or product. And emails. My team carefully reviews all the emails sent to product@appeon.com. and every email is guaranteed to receive a response. So please do drop us a line from time to time and share your thoughts. Year 2020 has been an unimaginable year, but despite it all, so many of you have been very active across the various channels I mentioned. I want to say a big thank you on behalf of the Appeon R&D team. Thanks for putting your trust in us, and thanks for your devotion to PowerBuilder. Coming next, let's watch a 2-minute video taken in SODEC in Tokyo. SODEC stands for Software and Apps Development Expo. It's Japan's largest exhibition featuring a variety of products for development, operation, and maintenance of software and apps. The booth of our partner, NCS, attracted a lot of visitors interested in PowerBuilder, PowerServer, InfoMaker, and SnapDevelop.
Hey, this is Japan IT Week in Makahari. Let's follow these people. I think they might know where they're going. Wow, this place is really big. I'm still walking. I think I'm going to follow this lady with the backpack. She seems to know where she's going. Hey, did you know that Appeon has partners all around the globe? But today we're focused on the Tokyo, Japan partner, Nippon Computer Systems. Makaharimazi, which is a convention center. Wow, this place is big. Yep, as big as the Staples Center in Los Angeles. Wow. Let's go inside and see if we can find the Nippon Computer Systems booth, talking about the Appeon products. I'll have a look here as I come through the front door. Maybe I can spot them. Over to the left? No. Hey, this guy seems to know where he's going. I'll follow him over to the information kiosk. Wow, they told me to read the signs. There's lots of signs. I'm going to go up top and have a look over the top of the convention center. Oh, there they are in the corner. I'm going to follow this guy over to the booth. And here we have the Nippon Computer Systems team. They're dressed in black and orange because it's Halloween. Wow, lots of great PowerBuilder information. I saw lots of people reading the brochures. They're talking about SnapDevelop, Power Server, and InfoMaker. Lots of people came to the booth. There was a definite interest in all the Appeon products. Lots of customers too, looking for new updated product information. Oh, swag. Candies. I'm going to ask this lady for some. People across the way were jealous at the booth. It was a really cool booth. Of course, it was COVID, so we had to wear masks, and so did our customers. We're talking to this young fellow here, and he was really interested in PowerBuilder. We had about 23,000 people drop by the convention center in 3 days and talked to a lot of people. And we hope to see you in Tokyo in April 2021.
Thank you, Julie. Awesome. Today I will demo the key new features of PowerBuilder 2019 R3. In this release, we have incorporated a lot of enhancements for PowerScript projects. Key areas that have been enhanced are the IDE and deployment, as well as the visuals that you develop with PowerBuilder, plus some miscellaneous enhancements. The following enhancements have been made to the IDE and deployment. Power Client. It is a new deployment method for client-server projects. It automates the installation and updates to your applications to users. The IDE and the runtime are now separate. There's no longer a tight dependency between them. Practically speaking, this allows a single version of the IDE to compile for multiple versions of the runtimes. Git and SVN source control have been both enhanced. Especially Git now allows you to branch from within the PowerBuilder IDE. The system dialogues are now resizable, so they are now much easier to work with. We have optimized some of the context menu so you can do less clicking to get things done. The visuals of your applications have been enhanced with a new Chromium web browser control. It supports integration between your application and the JavaScript in the web browser. We have also now integrated the open source C# so that you can modernize your graph reports and build powerful dashboards. PowerBuilder now supports Microsoft's UI automation framework. This makes your apps more accessible for the visually impaired and allows automation tools such as UiPath to work more effectively with PowerBuilder. 64-bit rich text control has been enhanced. So if you're compiling 64-bit applications, we've incorporated the same functionalities as 32-bit control. We have enhanced the PB unit conversion functions. Your applications can now support the large number of pixels of high-resolution monitors. We now support Microsoft's new SQL Server driver. This new driver is what Microsoft recommends all customers use because the native client is deprecated. In this demo, I will show you these 3 features of the IDE and these 3 features too. We have also incorporated a lot of enhancements for C# projects. Key areas that have been enhanced are the IDE and deployment, the .NET Data Store, and also platform enhancements that benefit both the IDE and the .NET Data Store. Docker integration has been enhanced to support from within the IDE Docker containers and orchestration. Asynchronous scaffolding and debugging of your services and controllers. This enables your application to handle more users. It makes your interface more responsive to the end user, and you can take full advantage of your server resources. More data window converter settings are now available. The data window converter has been enhanced with more settings to virtually eliminate the amount of manual coding of the models after conversion. You can now paste JSON and XML as classes. The .NET Data Store has also been enhanced to support asynchronous programming in addition to synchronous programming. You can now return the table blob, and there's a new class for importing data window templates in either XML or JSON formats. The platform from the IDE and the .NET Data Store has been greatly enhanced as well. .NET Core 3.1, which is Microsoft's latest version of .NET Core, and it is a long-term support version, is now supported. Sybase ASE is now supported. And we have also added support for many cloud databases like Amazon RDS, Amazon's Aurora, and Azure. Today I'm going to demo to you the new Docker features and the new asynchronous programming features. Let's see these new features in action now. First, I would like to demonstrate to you the new Chromium web browser control and also the Apache open source eCharts integrated with PowerBuilder. eCharts can help you add powerful data visualizations and dashboards to your PowerBuilder application. This demo application is using the new Chromium web browser control, which is used to display graphs generated by eCharts, and eCharts gets its data from the data windows in this application. This is just one use case for how you can leverage the new Chromium web browser control. So let's now take a look at eCharts in action. In it, you will notice that we have several different graph types we can use. Of course, PowerBuilder already has some of these graphs, but eCharts enhances them greatly, and eCharts supports over 30 different graph categories. So let's go ahead and take a look at a few examples of eCharts. I'll start with the line graph. On this window, I have a graph data window, a grid data window, and a web browser control. This web browser control has actually loaded a line graph eChart, which is drawing its data based on the grid data window here. Just to clarify, we are displaying the grid data window data for demo purposes only. Normally, instead of displaying a grid data window, you could use a data store to populate the data for the eCharts, or you could just get the data from non-data window sources such as a REST API, JSON, XML, etc. Another thing you will notice is that we have displayed the old graph data window. We are doing this purely for demo purposes, so you can easily compare the old graph with eCharts. So now let's drill down deeper into the line chart. As you can see, it looks more modern than the old graph line. It has a nice tooltip to show the data for that point. We can zoom in. Here we can see the data that was used to also plot that graph, which was taken from the grid data window to the left. If I click inside the web browser control, you will notice that I am now capable in PowerBuilder of catching the values from within the JavaScript, which I can make use of in my PowerScript code. Let's take a look at another graph. This is a K-line graph. As you may know, we do not have a K-line graph data window, so we cannot display an old graph data window to compare. All we have is the grid data window that is used to plot the K-line graph. As you can see right here, if I place my mouse over the graph, it is actually drawing references to the X and Y axes. And the tooltip is showing me all the data that is relevant to this graph type. Now let's take a look at how the zoom works for the K-line graph. And we have integrated the K-line with the grid data window so that when you select the point in the graph, it will select the corresponding row in the grid data window. So now let's take a look at the area graph. Let's now take a look at the bar graph. In this window, we have a master detail relationship between these two graph data windows. So if I click on the master data windows column, then it will retrieve data for the data window detail. On the right hand side, we have two web browser controls loading two eCharts in a similar master detail relationship. So if I were to click in one of the eCharts columns, then it will draw the detail bar for me too. Not only that, but you'll notice that by just placing my mouse over the graph's columns, I get this nice interactivity too. And I can even rotate my graph so I can look at it from different perspectives. So let's move on to take a look at the pie chart now. You will notice that UI and UX of the eCharts is much better than the graph data window. Let's continue to the scatter graph. Here's another graph type we don't have in the data window. I'll move on to the radar graph. Yet another graph type we don't have in the data window. I'll continue to the funnel graph. And here's another graph type we don't have in this data window as well. On the left hand side, I have created some color options in PowerScript to redraw my graph. So if I select different colors from this pane here, I can redraw my graph with that color scheme. This is another example of how eCharts can tightly integrate with your PowerScript code. Now let's take a look at the source code implementation to draw the eChart based on my grid data window. You will notice that there's a new command, the evaluate JavaScript sync method of the web browser control. What this command is doing is actually loading the values in a JSON format that I extracted from the data window and into my chart JavaScript object. And I can also do that in an asynchronous fashion with the new evaluate JavaScript async method of the web browser control, which would make my interface more responsive to the end user, because the application can continue processing while the eChart draws. And with the register event method of the web browser control, I can map my JavaScript events to my PowerScript events. So in this example, I'm catching the values from the eCharts to retrieve the next data window. Let's see how that looks in the app. So by registering the clicked event, I have passed the values from the eChart to retrieve this free-form data window that you'll see here, enhancing the interactivity between JavaScript of the web browser control, which in this example is eCharts and PowerScript. Okay, we have seen how to enhance the visuals that you develop with PowerBuilder. Now I'll show you some enhancements to the Git source control integration in PowerBuilder. We now support Git branching inside the IDE. So for example, if I create a new branch here and name it Elevate Demo, then switch to the new branch, you will notice how the Git context menu indicates which branch I'm working on. So if I were to make a change to this window, for example, let's say that I want to add the company name, then save the changes and run, as you can see, the company name is now displayed. So if I return to the master branch and open the same window, you will notice that the company name that we added in the Elevate Demo branch is not in the master branch. And when I click Run, PowerBuilder will run the master branch, since that is what it is currently selected. As you can see, the company name is not displayed. Okay, so now that we've seen the source control enhancements, let's talk about the decoupling of the IDE and the runtime. The first obvious thing that you will notice about this change is that the PowerBuilder IDE and the PowerBuilder runtime are two separate programs. Another thing you will notice as a result of this decoupling is that the PowerBuilder IDE and the PowerBuilder runtime versions no longer need to match. In this case, my IDE version is 2588 and the runtime is 2533. But probably the most exciting benefit of decoupling the IDE and the runtime is that a single IDE version can compile for multiple runtime versions. In fact, even minor versions such as revisions and maintenance releases can now coexist on a single machine. I'm sure you're wondering how you can switch with which runtime version the IDE should use to run, debug, and compile. Let's go back to PowerBuilder and take a look at how to do this. I'll click on the Tools menu, then click on System Options. You'll notice right here that PowerBuilder 2019 R3 now has a PowerBuilder runtime version selector. This is where I can switch which runtime version the IDE should use for the current project. As you can see, it is very easy to switch between multiple runtime versions, and you can easily roll back to a previous runtime version too. Okay, so now that we have seen the decoupling of the IDE and the runtime, I'll now show you what PowerClient is. It is a new deployment method for client-server apps that enables the automatic on-premise deployment of PowerBuilder client-server applications. With PowerClient, the developer no longer needs to create an installation program or to manually install and update the PowerBuilder application to each client machine. I'll now show you how to deploy the eCharts demo app with PowerClient. Deploying with PowerClient is easy. No code changes are required to the application. All we need to do to convert an existing client-server application to PowerClient is to add a new project object to the existing project. Then click OK. Now let's start with the General tab configurations, which is very similar to your existing client-server project object. Here goes my name of my application, then the resource file. I can do either full build or incremental, It supports both 32 and 64-bit deployments, and it also supports manifests. The Libraries tab is also basically the same as the existing client-server project object, but the rest of the tabs going forward is very different than traditional client-server deployment. In the Signing tab, we will find settings to digitally sign my application very easily. Signing ensures the integrity of the application and is required by some security configurations. Of course, you're not forced to sign it, and this is the default setting. If you do want to sign it, you can sign it using your own script, right here. Or you can sign it using the Microsoft Sign tool from the Mondos SDK. Let's go to the Deployment tab. Even though this is a client-server application, Power Client uses a web server to deploy your application to users. You can use any web server that you like. This tab specifies the configuration of your web server and how you want the web server to automatically install and update your apps to users. So let's take a look at how we can configure this. This is your application's current version. This is the minimum compatible version that you want to allow users to run. If the user's current version is older than this minimum version, the user will be required to upgrade before they can continue. These two settings are not required, but if specified, you can control when this version of your application is actually published to your users and when you want this version to expire so that the user is forced to upgrade. Just to clarify, you can set one or both of these settings or none at all. Now let's look into the deployment server settings. Here I'll add my web root path. Since I'm using IIS, this is the root path I'll put in place. But if it were another web server, I'll need to use a different root path. So let's test that this path is valid. This means that the web root path is valid, but it is important to note that it is not checking if the web server is running. So it is recommended that you test your web server before deploying. Let's now look into the remote server configuration. There are two ways to deploy to a remote server. You can create a standalone package that installs your app, or you can directly FTP to the web server from the PowerBuilder ID. Let's take a look how we directly deploy using the FTP option. The FTP servers needs to already be installed and running on the remote server. It is very important that my FTP account is pointing to the root folder of my web server. And in this case, I'll connect to this server IP address using this port and with these credentials. I can also securely connect to my FTP server by ticking this checkbox here. So let's test the FTP connection. But it is important to note that this is not checking if the web server is running. So it is recommended that you test your web server before deploying. The download mode configuration settings enables my application to download its PBD files as necessary, or download all of them before my application starts. The update strategy settings instructs Power Client how you want this application to deliver updates to your users. Always update. You should use this strategy if you want to ensure that your application is always up to date. The way this works is that every time the user starts the application, the Power Client connects to the web server to see if there is a newer version of the application available, and if there is, it will automatically update the user before they can start using the application. But it is important to note that this update strategy requires the user to have a connection to the web server every time they start the application. Update when connected. You should use this strategy if you want your application to be automatically updated, but you don't want to require your users to always have a connection to the web server before they can start to use your application. Under this scenario, when the user starts the app, it'll try to connect to the web server, and if it finds a new version, it'll automatically update. But if it cannot connect to the web server, for example, the user is offline, it will still allow the user to use the current version of the app already installed. Never update. You should use this update strategy if you want your application automatically installed, but you don't want it automatically updated. These checkboxes will create a desktop shortcut and/or a start menu shortcut for your application so that the user does not need a URL every time they want to start your application. Now let's continue to the External Files tab. This is where I can specify the external files and folders that will be downloaded to the client, including any DLLs and OCXs that need to be registered for the app to run. If the number of external files is large, we recommend you create packages instead so that it is compressed for faster file transfer. So for the eShards demo application, I will create 2 packages. I'll name the first one dist, then I'll add the folder dist, which contains the eShards files. I will now create a new package for my theme files because this demo application is using the new UI themes feature of PowerBuilder. Then I'll add the corresponding folder. Now, if you don't want to use packages or you don't want to put all your files in packages, there is the option to add files in a standalone basis. You can have the files be downloaded before the app starts or downloaded as necessary. Okay, let's see how to do this. I will now click on the Files section and then click on Add Files. I'll select the files that I need one by one. For example, this file here is the new SQL Server driver installer that needs to be installed to my users to connect to the database. By adding this file here, Power Client will automatically download this installer to the users so that it can be executed before my application starts. One thing that I would like to point out is that this is the only SQL Server driver for PowerBuilder that has not been deprecated by Microsoft and will receive new SQL Server features going forward. So we strongly recommend you switch from the native client to this new driver now supported in PowerBuilder 2019 R3. Now I'll add the resource file that I want to be downloaded as necessary. In my case, I'll add the image files here. Now let's go to the Runtime tab. Here's where I can see the runtime version my application will run on. This is where I need to select all the necessary runtime modules that I want to include in my deployment. So for this specific application, I will select the ones that I really need to minimize download size. You will notice that I am checking this database driver. The reason is that Power Client is still a client-server approach. If you want to deploy over the internet with a cloud architecture instead of client-server, then you should use Power Server instead of Power Client. The last configuration steps to specify the preload event configuration if my application installation requires it. Here I can place any number of batch commands I need to execute after the application downloads, but before it starts. So in this demo, I want to install the new SQL Server driver that I had added to the external files tab. By typing this batch command, I can install the driver in a quiet and passive mode. I can specify to run my batch commands as an administrator if needed. So now I'm ready to save the changes and deploy my Power Client project. Now the deployment is finished, all my users need to do is to install the application, is to enter the correct URL in the web browser, which is the address of my server along with the app name and /apprunner.html. This will actually prompt me to download the Power Client app launcher. Now there are 2 ways to get this launcher onto the user's machine. One way is for the user to install it by themselves, as I'm showing you here, or you can bypass this step and have your IT administrator pre-install the Power Client app launcher to the end users through the MSI file we provide. It is important to note that the Power Client app launcher itself does not require admin rights. Whether your users will require admin rights will depend on how you have built your application. Once the launcher is installed, my Power Client application will start immediately after this. And since I chose to create a desktop shortcut, the user does not have to enter the URL every time to start the application. Instead, the user can conveniently start the application by clicking the shortcut. Okay, we've seen how to automate the install. Now let's see how we can push updates to the user. I'll now open PowerBuilder and add a button to the welcome window. Now I'll redeploy my app. Before I start the application as the user and show you that the update took effect, let's first see that the update strategy is working correctly. Since I selected the always update strategy, if I stop the web server, the user will not be able to start the application because it cannot get the update. So if I start IIS again, the user will now be able to start the application and the update has been automatically applied to the user's installation. Okay, so now that we know what Power Client is, I'll demo to you the new accessibility features available in PowerBuilder 2019 R3. Previous releases of PowerBuilder supported a Windows accessibility and automation framework called Microsoft Active Accessibility, or MSAA. This is a legacy technology introduced in Windows 95. It supports the PowerBuilder standard controls well, but it imposes major limitations on the PowerBuilder custom controls such as data windows. Starting from PowerBuilder 2019 R3, PowerBuilder supports a newer and more capable Microsoft technology which overcomes the limitations of MSAA. This new technology called Microsoft UI Automation offers a richer set of properties and extended interfaces for manipulating not only standard controls but also custom controls such as PowerBuilder data windows and child controls in data windows. But you might be wondering, why is accessibility important if in your company you are not required to cater to the visually impaired? Accessibility can also be used to automate processes, for example, by using robotic process automation or RPA, tools such as UiPath, and the need for such automation is quite common nowadays. So let's take a look at the differences between MSAA and Microsoft's UI automation frameworks. Here we have a data window. If you are already using the accessibility properties here, then you don't need to do anything else to enable Microsoft's UI automation. Just update to 2019 R3 and recompile. But if you're not currently using accessibility, then besides upgrading to 2019 R3, we need to also specify the accessible name and description of your controls and recompile. Regardless, it is very little work to benefit from accessibility with the new Microsoft UI automation. So now let's see how the older version stacks up against the new UI automation. This blue theme app is a PowerBuilder 2019 R2 application. I will now open the Inspector Object tool from the Windows SDK. Here I have selected the MSAA, and if I click on the data window, the data related to this data window is not readily accessible. It also didn't correctly identify that I clicked on the data window, and it's actually displaying none. So I will now open this PowerBuilder 2019 R3 application with a dark theme, and open the Inspector Object window again and select the new UI Automation Framework. Then if I click on the data window again, it is correctly accessing the column that I clicked on and correctly identifying that this is a data window. Okay, so that concludes some of the key enhancements for PowerScript projects. Let's now switch gears and take a look at some enhancements for C# projects. I'll begin by showing you how SnapDevelop now supports developing C# projects that target the .NET Core 3.1 framework. Now, it is important to note that this version is the latest one from Microsoft, and it is actually a long-term support version. .NET Core 3.1 includes a number of improvements such as JSON API, support for ARM64 processors, C# 8.0, etc. I'll continue by converting a PowerScript data window into a .NET DataStore with C#. We have now added additional settings to the data window converter for model generation. Your models can now be generated with all or some of these new attributes. When migrating a data window to a web API, some of the data processing logic predefined in the data window may not be applicable to the server side, and we do not necessarily need to use it anyway. For example, the data window filter attribute, if the filtering logic is only used for the front-end UI display, then it probably isn't necessary on the server side, because it could naturally make the .NET DataStore retrieval process slower when used. Therefore, you can choose which features to use on the final generated model. So I'll now proceed to convert this data window. I'll click on Export and OK, which takes me to the next enhancements I want to demo. The .NET DataStore now supports asynchronous programming in addition to synchronous programming. Earlier versions of the .NET DataStore only supported synchronous programming. This asynchronous programming enhancement to the .NET DataStore is very powerful because it enables your application to handle more users, it makes your user interface more responsive, and it allows you to take full advantage of your server resources. So let's start by scaffolding an asynchronous service and controller based on this .NET DataStore model. We have included new templates for scaffolding the services and controllers for asynchronous programming. Now we'll click Generate to get asynchronous services and controllers. You'll notice that the .NET DataStore is doing an asynchronous retrieval. This is accomplished by using the new retrieve async method of the .NET Data Store. Plus, we have also added additional APIs to the .NET Data Store. So any method that interacts with a database now has a proper async method too. The async method also supports cancellation tokens too. My template has also included the proper async prefix as well as the return type task, plus it also adds the await method for me. Now that we have generated our asynchronous service and controller, let's take a look at how we can test and debug asynchronously. I need to open the controller, right-click on the method I want to test, for example retrieve, then select run test. Of course, I could also debug my test too. This is the Web API Tester tool that enables me easily to test my Web APIs without having to create a front end or mingle around with JSON. The Web API Tester tool has now been enhanced to support testing of asynchronous Web APIs in addition to synchronous Web APIs. As you'll notice, my test succeeded with status code 200 OK, and it returned the JSON data from my .NET Data Store. But let's now try debugging an asynchronous method. I will open this other project so I can show you the new debugging features here. You will notice that in this service I have added breakpoints for my debugging. If I now click on the debug button, this will run my Web API in debug mode. I will now call my Web API from the URL. Here we can see that it hit the breakpoint. This right here is the current thread it is on, so I'll step into the next line of code. And the thread number changes, which is what we were expecting. Now let's look at the new enhanced support for Docker integration. Specifically, we have made it easy to containerize your C# project from within the SnapDevelop IDE. And this integration of SnapDevelop and Docker allows you to better support DevOps because Docker deployment has been significantly simplified in this release. That's because Docker modules are now integrated directly into SnapDevelop to make development, deployment, and testing seamless. Compared with the traditional command line, the GUI interface management approach is more consistent with developer habits. Many Docker native command operations are implemented in this module. Right here we have the Docker engine. We can also add another engine here by placing the IP address and the port number. We can pull Docker images from the Docker registry. Here's an Oracle database engine image, for example. Let's expand the Docker engine. Here we can see the Docker images as well as their corresponding registry or their status, for example. Here I can see my Docker containers, and I can also see if they are started, stopped, or failed. You can also start an image as a container, or you can tag it, push it to the registry, or delete it. You can also start, stop, execute, restart, or delete a container too. And a very nice feature too is that you can directly test your application and its Docker image locally here. I can now directly add Docker support to my projects by right-clicking on the project and selecting Add Docker Support. I need to tell it now that what OS I will target. For this demo, I will select Linux and click OK. As you can see here, it not only created the proper Docker file for me, but the SnapDevelop IDE also provides new code completion features to assist me in configuring my Docker file. I can also now directly publish my project as a Docker image. I can select the engine connection, and I can choose if I want to connect to it using HTTP or HTTPS, as well as the engine URL and the port number. I can also select the Docker registry. I can name my Docker image. I can also tag it, then click on Finish. This will actually create the Docker image for me and publish it to my Docker registry. Let's head back to the Docker Explorer. In this Explorer window, we can now see our newly created customer Docker image that I just created. Now by right-clicking the image, I can run it as a container. Here I can place a name for my container and perform port bindings between my host and my container. There are a number of more advanced configurations that I can perform on my container in this window. But for this demo, I will just click OK. This will create the container and run it. As you can see in this window, we have detailed information about my container. If I click here on my host port, this will actually open my browser window where I can test my Web API directly. Now let's take a look at another Docker related enhancement, which is how to easily orchestrate my apps from within the SnapDevelop IDE. I will now stop and delete this container because I don't need it anymore. I can now directly add container orchestration support to the project. Applications typically consist of individual containerized components, often called microservices. They must be managed sequentially if they are to function properly together, and that's why we need the container orchestrator. The process that organizes multiple containers is called the container orchestrator. So this will prompt me to choose the container orchestrator and the target OS. I'll just click OK. This has generated the Docker ignore and Docker compose files for me. The Docker ignore file tells Docker to ignore these files. The Docker compose file tells Docker the additional configuration necessary to run the containers in the orchestrator. Now let's say that I want to include another project in this orchestrator. All I need to do is right click on it, then select add and click on container orchestrator support, then click OK. You will notice how this added the second project to my Docker compose file. Now what I need to do is add the port configuration and container name for both projects. What's nice is there's code completion features for this file too. I will now save the changes, and you'll notice that SnapDevelop has automatically added the Docker file to my second project since it was missing. Let's now run the Docker orchestrator container. This is actually creating the containers and starting them for me. I can now proceed to test both projects that are being orchestrated. The customer web API is working properly, and the products web API is working properly too. So this concludes the demo of the enhancements for C# projects. We hope you have enjoyed this demo for PowerBuilder 2019 R3, and we hope you will try this new version soon. Okay, so it's time now for the Keynote's Q&A.
Thanks, Govinda, for that great demo. Wow, PowerBuilder 2019 R3 looks like one of the best versions of PowerBuilder I can remember in recent years. A lot of advancements there. So as Govinda said, right now it's time for the Elevate Keynote Q&A. I want to make sure there's no confusion. This Q&A is questions that we gathered from the conference registrations. They are not questions we received live during the keynote presentation. So just keep that in mind. But we gathered this Q&A because we thought it'd be useful to share some of these questions that we repeatedly saw from the customers that registered for the conference. Now, feel free to email any additional questions you have now that you've seen the keynote, and you can send that to marketing@appeon.com. You know, we have a lot of participation in Elevate this year since it's online now, very accessible. So just keep in mind that we're going to be really overwhelmed with all of these questions, and it typically will take a few business days for us to get back to you, but we'll make an best effort to get back to you as soon as we can. So I'd like to begin with one of the first questions we noticed in the registrations is that I'd like to know about the future of mobile application development with PowerBuilder and PowerServer. So it's true that the older generation of PowerServer did support going to iOS and Android. What we've done is in the new PowerServer gone to a true desktop cloud app that is native PBVM, so it only runs on Windows operating system. So your path forward in terms of mobile would be to use the data windows in embedded SQL that PowerServer is going to automatically convert into REST APIs for you. And whatever MVOs in your application that are usable to, you could automatically convert that with PowerScript Migrator as well into REST APIs. And once they're in REST APIs, you could build the UI however you want. When you're doing pure UI development and not coding business logic and data access logic, it's actually quite simple. It's monkey work, it takes time, but it's not difficult. And there's a number of different UI technologies you could use. For mobile, probably the two I'd recommend is take a look at either doing HTML if you don't need a real app, or take a look at React Native, which is a really good open source solution. But there's a lot of options out there. You're not limited to any particular technology. All right, second question. what are the steps to convert an older PowerBuilder application into .NET? Well, the first would be to upgrade to the latest version of PowerBuilder and to get onto the Cloud Pro Edition, which gives you the full suite of tools to do all that conversion. Now, if you want to go with a pure .NET application, not a desktop cloud app where you have a PowerBuilder UI, then all you'll be able to salvage from your older PowerBuilder application is the business logic. And PowerScript Migrator will take care of doing that for you. You will need to encapsulate all the business logic that you want to extract out of the application into MVOs. And then you'll be able to open those MVOs inside the SnapDevelop IDE, use the PowerScript Migrator, and you generate a C# class with the .NET DataStore. And then it's pure C#. You could interface with whatever .NET UI you want. You could do a WPF app, you could do ASP.NET, and so on. All right, what are the advantages of using Appeon tools instead of rewriting? And I assume that means rewriting a PowerBuilder application. Well, out of all the customers I've talked to, I've never heard of a rewrite going easy, fast, smooth. Typically, when they get a quote from an outsourcing company, it's millions of dollars to rewrite. So it depends which tool you're talking about. If you're looking at Power Server, I mean, you could have your whole app converted probably in days, depending on your security requirements. So days or millions of dollars. I mean, it's a no-brainer unless you need your user interface to be HTML, or you need everything to be C#. You don't want a mix of PowerScript for UI and C# for server side. Now, if you do want to go completely to C#, that's fine too. As we indicated, we'll take you anywhere you want to go with all the different tools because we have customers with different needs. So you can just use SnapDevelop with the PowerScript Migrator to leverage all the business logic that you have. Okay. And even with that, it's not taking care of the UI, but just salvaging your business logic, that could reduce the cost of a rewrite in half. Now, rewrites are not cheap, so cutting a huge number in half, that's a big savings. All right, I have some stuff written in C#. What's the best way to import it in PowerBuilder 2019 R3? Well, there's a couple of ways that you could take advantage of .NET interoperability. The first is using the .NET DLL importer. And typically you'd want to do this if you're running a client-server app and you don't want to have a REST API call or internet connection, you're just on-premise. So what the .NET DLL importer does is it imports anything .NET, could be C#, could be VB.NET. It generates a set of PowerScript interfaces automatically for you, so you can call that .NET DLL as if it's just a PowerScript function or MVO. Okay. Now, keep in mind though that there are certain requirements of how the C# needs to be written to be compatible in terms of data types and other things. So you might need to create a wrapper around it. Now, another way to do this, and this is my preferred way because I'm really a believer in the whole cloud direction, and I see so many of our customers starting to move in that direction. So in my opinion, the better way would be take that C# DLL, wrap it as a REST API, and PowerBuilder 2019 R3's REST capability is just very robust. You have a specialized REST client in addition to the generic HTTP client. We support OAuth, we support JWT tokens. We have encryption services with the cryptor object. We have encoding services with the coder object. So there's really powerful support for REST API, and I think that would be the better way. That way that C# code could be shared not just by the PowerBuilder application, but any other application you write that might need to use this.
Thanks, Amin. Question: how can I download the beta version of 2019 R3? The beta testing cycle of 2019 R3 has already ended. However, if you want to try out the beta version, you can still download it. If you are an existing PowerBuilder subscriber, please go to the download page on our website, https://account.appeon.com/download. If you are not a current customer, please email trial@appeon.com and we can arrange special access for you. Question: where can I find manuals in Spanish of all these topics? Sorry, we don't have manuals in Spanish. You might want to try using Google Translate. Question: we have 300 customers with their own local DB. What is the best way to deploy PB's new REST API objects to the customers? The best way is to publish the REST API as an image to Docker registry. Then your customers can pull the image to their local system and use the image to run the REST API locally. Question: in the 64-bit deployment nodes, the clear all, and the status bar are not supported. Are there plans to support these features in the 2021 release? 2019 R3 will provide 64-bit TX text control for 64-bit applications. This means that the clear all, and the status bar are now supported in 64-bit rich text edit. This version is scheduled to release in January 2021. Question: the steps to convert an older PowerBuilder application to a .NET application. The first step: decide the portion of the application you plan to convert to .NET. For example, do you want to convert the data access logic or business logic, or even the whole UI of the application? There are a number of great tech sessions at Elevate about this topic. Check out the C# dev track. If those tech sessions don't address your question, please contact sales@appeon.com for further assistance. Question: I'd like to know about the future of mobile applications development with PowerBuilder PowerServer. You can already use the C# conversion tools, PowerScript Migrator, .NET DataStore, or PowerServer to develop the server side of mobile applications. So the question for the future is mainly about how to develop the mobile UI. We are no longer locking down the UI to a particular UI technology for mobile. You can use whatever UI technology as the base for your converted non-visual PowerBuilder code. Developing the UI is a manual effort, but it is generally not difficult to do or can be outsourced to Appeon consulting partners. Question: what is the best way to migrate a PowerBuilder client-server application to the web and to mobile? What are the advantages of using Appeon tool over rewriting using something else? The best way possible is to use the upcoming PowerServer 2021. The applications are deployed to the web and will still run natively on the Windows desktop with the functionality and UI of desktop application. Because the database and database-related operations are converted to standard REST APIs, you can select an appropriate mobile UI technology to manually develop the UI of your mobile app and make calls to the converted REST APIs. Assuming you can accept a desktop cloud app for Windows, the advantages of using PowerServer 2021 is its cost and risk. It's just days of converting and coding work to change an existing client-server project to cloud native. Question: where is the academic version of PowerBuilder? There is no academic version of PowerBuilder. If you want, please apply for our 30-day free trial. 30 days will be sufficient for you to learn the PowerBuilder fundamentals, following the courses provided at AppionU, www.appion.com/appion-u. Question: what's the benefits of SnapDevelop over Visual Studio? SnapDevelop is lightweight C# IDE focused on rapidly creating REST APIs. Of course, you could build a REST API with Visual Studio, but I'm confident you will find it takes longer to do so. SnapDevelop provides special scaffolding of services and controllers for REST APIs with the .NET DataStore. It provides a built-in Web API tester that allows you to easily inspect, test, and debug REST APIs. Most importantly, it provides tight integration with PowerBuilder and the .NET DataStore, so you can rapidly convert existing data windows, embedded SQL, and non-visual PowerScript to REST APIs. Question: for Cloud Deployable Client PB 2021, do we need to have PowerServer? If you are looking to convert an existing client-server application automatically to be a cloud deployable app, then yes, you will need PowerServer. PowerServer automatically converts PowerBuilder's data access layer into a cloud-native architecture. Question: is Appeon developing any web-based front-end development tool like Angular, etc.? Sure. SnapDevelop will support developing ASP.NET Core HTML apps in C# or HTML apps in JavaScript or TypeScript. Question: what Appeon technology changes might be in store once .NET 5 is released? We will stay on top of the latest .NET technology and plan to add support for .NET 5 as soon as possible. As far as we know, no major technology changes need to be made on our side for supporting .NET 5.
Excellent. That concludes the Elevate 2020 keynote. Now it's time to elevate your app skills and contacts with all the technical sessions we have lined up from Appeon staff, Appeon MVPs, and also many of our community presenters. So to participate in the live technical sessions, simply go to the live streaming center on the home page. That'll take you to the technical sessions page. And the technical sessions are organized by tracks. You have a new features track, PowerScript development track, and C# development track. Now, at the broadcast time, if you simply click the play button, you'll be able to join the live stream. And joining at the scheduled broadcast time is critical because it'll give you the opportunity to live chat with Appeon staff, with attendees from around the world, as well as the presenters. Now, doing the live chat requires to have a YouTube or Google Mail account. If you don't have one or don't feel comfortable registering, that's okay. You can still watch the live stream, you just can't chat. At the end of the session, please leave your feedback. We really appreciate it. That will allow us to improve Elevate going forward, as well as give feedback to our presenters. So we hope you enjoy the Elevate 2020 conference.